what happened in Portugal is that Judaism eventually either died out or went so far underground that nobody knew about it. And it persisted in the underground all the way to the 20th century, when a specialist from the United States, Samuel Schwartz, rediscovered what we call crypto-Jews. Jews in the Northeast Mountains who were practicing a unique form of their religion. Unique because, as I said, their books were confiscated, so they didn't have Torahs, they didn't have prayer books, they didn't have Haggadahs, they didn't have anything. So the tradition became an oral one, usually transmitted across generations from mother to daughter, because the most important celebration for the Jews became the Sabbath. It became, I sometimes talk about that instead of a geographic center, Judaism in Portugal, and probably in Spain too, acquired a temporal center. The week as it moved toward and away the Sabbath. And that was the most important part of the week for these underground, secret Jews who never spoke about it in public until the 20th century. When Samuel Schwartz rediscovered this community in Belmont in the Northeast Mountains of people practicing a unique form of Judaism. And he described what they did in various papers. They lived somewhat separately from the other people in Belmont. They were not rich. They were traders and tailors and shoemakers, and they knew they were different. They knew they were Jews, but they never talked about it. And so in subsequent decades, up until the present time, they've come out of the closet, so to speak. There's now a community of 140 practicing Jews in Belmont. There's a new synagogue paid for by Jewish communities overseas. There was a huge schism in the community as well, because some people didn't want to convert, in quote marks, to standard Judaism. They wanted to hold on to their crypto-Judaism, and some of the people wanted to accept a more traditional form of Judaism. So rabbis came from Israel and New York and other places and taught them more traditional forms of Judaism. Throughout the most mountainous, rugged areas of Portugal, there are small communities of people. I won't say that they practice Judaism, but they know they have a Jewish background. They will tell you stories about a grandmother or great-grandfather who told them that Friday evening was very special, of a great-grandmother who would still light candles every Friday evening. They will tell you of ancestors who still use the word Elohim, but who didn't know what it meant, who taught them the old prayers, which were mostly Christian prayers, but spoke of Saint Moses. Who's this Saint Moses? That doesn't exist in Christianity. It doesn't even exist in standard Judaism. There's Moses, he's not a saint. So people know of this background, and they are curious about Judaism for the first time in centuries. I say centuries because during the Inquisition, you didn't talk about who you were. You didn't talk about your beliefs that you practiced at home. Ever. Not with anyone outside your family. And during the Portuguese dictatorship, which lasted from the 1920s until the Portuguese Revolution of 1974, it wasn't a specifically anti-Semitic dictatorship, but it was anti-Semitic. You know, the Portuguese dictator Salazar declared 3 days of national official mourning when Hitler died. That tells you something about the mentality here. So Jews did not come out of the closet, secret Jews did not come out of the closet here during the dictatorship. It's only since the revolution that they have felt it was progressively more safe to speak about who they were and what they believed. But for the first time in centuries, people are curious about Jewish Portuguese history. In part, I'm proud to say that my books are responsible for that. Because before I wrote my books, when I found out about the Lisbon massacre of 1506, I talked to my friends, lawyers, doctors, tenured professors, and I would say, what do you know about the Lisbon massacre? 2,000 converted Jews were murdered in Lisbon and burnt in the Rocio. No, that didn't happen here. I'd said, well, I'm sorry, it did happen here, and I would show them my documentation. So when other people like to whitewash something or forget something, I grab onto it and I say, you know what, this is what I'm going to talk about. And so I talked about Jewish history in Portugal and how wretched the Portuguese kings here were to the Jewish population and how they were forgotten.